15 years ago, just after I graduated and started working as a radiology technician in a hospital. Something happened late one night that I still remember clearly. That night, I was on the night shift. Suddenly, an emergency patient was rushed in. After a quick urgent scan, the patient was sent off to the ward. The intense flurry of work finally settled down. It was roughly 2 in the morning. I was walking through the hospital, heading back to the duty room to catch a short nap. The duty room was on the first floor. That floor had only outpatient clinics, a security office, and a few examination rooms. After finishing with emergency patients, usually only the security guard and I remained on that floor during the late hours. The first floor was dimly lit, only emergency exit lights glowed faintly, along with the weak buzz of the vending machines. The whole place felt shadowy and quiet. As I walked along, I spotted a patient far ahead, sitting on one of the sofas in the gloomy waiting area. An IV stand stood next to him, his right hand hooked up to a drip. The man looked quite old. His hair was thin and sparse, his frame so thin he seemed skin and bones. He wore the standard inpatient pajamas, the chest area slightly visible. I noticed the old man was drinking a bottled Melon soda. Was he just thirsty, so he'd come to buy a drink? I wondered that as I passed in front of him, giving a slight nod before continuing down to the duty room. The next morning, the old man surfaced in my mind suddenly, and a bad feeling hit me. Had probably made a huge mistake. If he was a hospital patient, then his intake of fluids and sugar would have had to be carefully controlled, depending on his condition. What if HED slipped out to buy that Melon soda without the nurses noticing? If something so small led to a sudden worsening of his health, it would be a serious problem. With heavy dread, I resolved to file an incident report immediately. I went straight to my supervisor and told him about the patient drinking juice on the first floor sofa during last night's shift. I confessed that I hadn't informed the nurses and asked what I should do. My supervisor looked at me and said, "Was it an old man? Very thin? Receiving an IV? And drinking Melon soda?" I was stunned. HED described the man perfectly. "How do you know that?" I asked. He shrugged, smiling slightly. "It doesn't really matter. That old man has been dead here for over 10 years. He still shows up sometimes. Lots of people have seen him when he was still alive and healthy. He often used to buy Melon soda at that vending machine there. Sometimes, beyond, he even bought coffee for people." My supervisor laughed softly and added, "Don't worry. It's no big deal. He won't harm anyone." Even after hearing this, a chill ran down my spine. Though the old man looked just like any other person, the thought that I had walked past him, so close, unsettled me deeply. But that's hospital work, full of strange and inexplicable experiences. I only stayed at that hospital a little over 3 months before transferring elsewhere. This happened 15 years ago, and the hospital still stands. Maybe, just maybe, that old man still appears late at night, sitting on the first floor sofa, quietly sipping Melon soda. That was the summer of my junior year in college. I've never forgotten it. At that time, I was juggling several part-time jobs, one of them at a small tavern near campus. Many classmates worked there too, so they had naturally become close friends. We often hung out together. 2 of them, Yanjian and Zhao Yuan, were especially close to me. One time, when they came over to my place for drinks, Zhao Yuan suddenly asked if we wanted to visit a bath-shaped place known locally. For one thing, it was a place where ghosts were said to definitely appear. We were a bit drunk and thought a walk might help sober us up. So the 4 of us, me, Yanjian, his girlfriend Yishi, and Zhao Yuan, decided to check it out. Yanjian, Yishi, and I went in one small compact car. Zhao Yuan rode his electric scooter. When we arrived, we parked right by the hospital's main entrance and shone our flashlights around. It was an abandoned hospital, now a white 3-story building, its walls peeling, windows shattered, covered in graffiti. We joked about how meeting a gang of bi-car delinquents there would probably be scarier than any ghost. Inside, the first thing we saw was the lobby and the reception desk. Scattered papers laced room around the front counter. Everywhere around it, trash and bottles were piled up. To the left and right of the reception, there was a hallway on each side. We swept our flashlight beams down both corridors. On the left were examination rooms, one after another, On the right, we could make out signs for a cafeteria and a shop. We headed left. The hallway was lined with examination rooms on both sides, each door marked with a placard. We stepped into the nearest one and found it just as trashed as the rest, though some medical equipment still remained. Nothing scary happened, so we left, disappointed. Back in the main hall, we spotted stairs leading to the second floor. We decided to check it out. When we reached the top, we found the second floor surprisingly clean, no graffiti, no garbage. We raised our flashlights and scanned the corridors stretching left and right. Both sides seemed to be lined with patient rooms. We chose the right corridor and made our way toward the room at the very end. Inside, there was nothing unusual, just for beds and a clock hanging on the wall. We moved from room to room, checking each one. I don't know which room it was when I suddenly noticed something. Every clock in every room we passed, they'd all stopped at 2 o'clock. I glanced down at my own watch. The hands pointed to exactly 2. A chill crept over me. I told the others. They all brushed it off as coincidence and didn't want to hear it. So we kept going, checking the other rooms deeper inside. And sure enough, just as I'd noticed, every single clock was frozen at 2 o'clock. That's when we started to feel afraid. We decided to head back. And then from the far end of the corridor, deep in the darkness, came a sound, clear and unmistakable. Click, click, click. It sounded exactly like high heels or boots striking tile. We looked at each other. Then we ran. As I bolted down the hallway, I kept glancing sideways into each room. Every clock, 2 o'clock, every single one. We flew down the stairs and burst out of the hospital. For a moment, we caught our breath, but the footsteps didn't stop. They got louder, closer. The sound echoed inside my skull, like it was chasing us from within. We scrambled into the car. The moment Yanjian started the engine, I felt the vehicle jolt like something had jumped onto it. "Dumb," I shouted. Yanjian tore out of the parking lot at full speed. I was worried about Zhao Yuan. He was alone on his electric scooter. Once we hit the road, his scooter zipped past us. Seeing him up ahead, I felt a wave of relief. We all calmed down a little. It should be fine now, we thought. Yanjian slowed down, but Zhao Yuan didn't slow down at all. He kept racing forward like his life depended on it. Then, in the blink of an eye, he crashed. We slammed on the brakes and jumped out. Thankfully, it was just scrapes. I pulled off his helmet. His face was pale as paper. He grabbed me and said that when he passed our car, he'd seen something, a woman with long hair, clinging to the back of our vehicle. I turned and looked. There was nothing there. I helped Zhao Yuan into the car, then took over riding the scooter myself. That night, none of us dared to be alone, so we all stayed at my place. By morning, everyone had calmed down enough to go home. That's when I noticed the voicemail light blinking on my phone. I pressed the button. The automated voice began, "You have one message. Time to 00. Then came static, and beneath it the sound of those high heels. Click, click, click. All the fear came flooding back. Suddenly, the noise cut out. Silence. A few seconds passed. Then a woman's voice, hoarse, grating, spoke. "I'm going to kill you." My whole body went cold. I couldn't stop shaking. It felt like the room was filled with that terrible, rasping voice, your voice, deafening and inescapable. I reached to delete the message, but the phone rang. Trembling, I picked up. It was Zhao Yuan. His voice was shaking too. "I just got home," he said. "There's a message on my phone." A woman's voice. "She said she's going to kill us. But the call, it came from your house. When I was in the hospital with an injured leg, I met another patient around my age. We became friends. One night after lights minus out, we were smoking together in the smoking area. She sighed and said, I really don't want to go back to my room. We weren't in the same ward. So I asked if there was someone she didn't get along with. She said no, just that there was this old man, this elderly grandfather." I nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, some old people can be really difficult." She frowned as if wanting to say something but holding back, then finally murmured, "It's not what you think. If that old man were alive, no matter how difficult he was, It wouldn't matter. I blinked, puzzled. What do you mean? That guy started telling me what he had experienced. One day, after lights out, I wanted to go back to my ward from the smoking room. Walking down the corridor in front of the ward, the dim hallway stretched ahead. There, at a distance, I saw an old grandpa standing silently, seemingly lost in thought. I thought maybe he was just an old man with dementia, but honestly, it was pretty creepy and inconvenient. When I got close enough, I said to him, "Excuse me, can I get through?" Even saying that, he didn't respond at all. I repeated myself several times, but the old man remained unmoved. I figured I was being ignored, so I got a bit angry and raised my voice, telling him to move aside. Still, no reaction. I had no choice but to force my way past. I tried to squeeze by with my shoulder, but it felt like I didn't even touch him. No resistance. Just walked right through. I thought to myself, that's strange at this distance. I should have bumped into him, but I felt nothing. As I kept walking forward, I glanced back and saw that old man staring at me with a blank, unfocused gaze. His face showed no emotion, his eyes pale. I realized he wasn't an ordinary old man. I ran quickly, right to my bed and crawled under the covers, shivering all night. By morning, when the nurse came to take my temperature, I asked, "There's an old grandpa here, right?" The nurse looked awkward and said, "You saw him? Are you one of those who can see?" Hearing her words, I roughly understood what was going on. If it had ended there, that would have been enough. But it only got worse, much worse. Just last night, I suddenly woke up, wanted to go to the bathroom. When I got up, I saw that same old man standing right beside my bed. After seeing him, I didn't even dare to pee. I hid under the quilt until morning. I'd rather wet the bed than see those eyes again. After he finished his cigarette, he sighed and said, "Just thinking about going back to the ward and maybe running into that old man again makes me not want to go back." After hearing that, I told him, "For now, Wenwinham, just make a rock mountain in a dish, put it in your ward, and get some sleep. We'll figure it out later." And I went with him to his ward. On the corridor, I asked, "Is the old man out here?" He told me, Nope, not in the corridor. At the entrance of his ward." I peeked inside. It was a 6- person room. His bed was at the very back, next to the window. He said, "If the old man is inside, he always stands by the window." Hearing that, vivid and unsettling images formed in my mind. He said, "Maybe the old man won't show up today." I said, "At least just pile up the rock mountain for now. Get it done and then get some rest." After helping him set the rock mountain in the dish, I returned to my ward. The next morning, I was smoking in the smoking room when he came over, his face pale. He said, "This is bad." He told me that last night, he placed the little dish with the rock mountain beside his pillow. He tossed and turned, barely falling asleep. He had a dream. In his dream, he stood in front of an old house with a thatched roof. He entered the house. It was a large dirt-floored entryway, a kind of transitional space between outside and inside, typical in traditional Japanese houses. He walked to the stairs. On either side were rooms. One side was a room with tatami mats. The other was closed off by sliding doors. He went toward the closed sliding doors, opened them, and entered a room surrounded on all sides by sliding doors. He opened the sliding door directly in front of him, and stepped through. Again, it was a room enclosed by sliding doors on all sides. He kept going forward, reaching a room with a large folding screen. On both sides were more sliding doors. He didn't like the left side, so he wanted to check the right side. Just as he was about to walk right, strange things happened. No matter how hard he tried to go to the right, his body felt pulled, dragged all the way toward the left. He called out, "Right, right," but his body was forcefully sucked to the left. With no other choice, he opened the left sliding door. Inside was a very bright space. Seeing that relieved him, and he went out to the left, leaving the room. At that moment, he heard a rough voice, whispering fiercely in his ear, "Damn it, failed, screwed it up." Then he woke up. It was already morning. He got up and saw the dish with salt beside him. The salt had all melted and turned into a gelatinous lump. He took a drag from his cigarette and said, "If I had succeeded in going into the room on the right in the dream, what would I have become?" After hearing all that, I was left speechless, goosebumps all over. During the live stream, I went exploring with 4 friends, 5 of us in total, at an abandoned hospital nearby. As soon as we reached the entrance on the first floor, a heavy, unpleasant chill was in the air. But you know how kids at that age are full of hot blood, always wanting to prove themselves. So I said, "It doesn't feel like anything," and pretty calm about it. And the others nodded along, agreeing. Once inside, we started on the first floor, checking every room one by one. Nothing happened at all. We just kept climbing up the floors. And when we reached the rooftop, someone suggested we take a commemorative photo. So everyone struck a pose, ready for the picture. That's when the camera shuttered button wouldn't press down, no matter how hard we tried. Instead of feeling scared by the weird occurrence, I actually felt excited. After quite a while, we finally managed to snap one photo. But when we later looked back at it, we all jumped in shock. On the photo, right at the rooftop door, stood a woman dressed in white. We were frozen in fear, screaming wildly, and scrambled to run away. Later, since one friend's father was a medium, we asked him to verify the photo. After seeing it, he felt something was seriously wrong. He performed an exorcism ritual for all of us and warned, "Don't ever go back there. If that thing finds you, something bad will happen." After that, everyone was safe. I got into high school without trouble and stopped exploring haunted places altogether. Life became peaceful. Until one day at school, a senior I was close to came to me and said, "My friends and I want to explore an abandoned hospital. You're a local, right? Do you know the place?" I knew exactly which hospital he meant, the same one we had gone to. So I advised against it. But he didn't take it seriously and replied, "Is that so? Sounds like a scary place." He told me he and his friends had planned to go there the next night. Then he left. A few days later, I ran into that senior again. He told me they had been to the abandoned hospital, roaming from the first floor all the way to the rooftop, and even went to the basement. Nothing happened. It wasn't scary at all. The moment I heard that, a chill crawled over my whole body, cold sweat pouring down, because that abandoned hospital didn't have a basement. This was more than 10 years ago. Back then, I was still in high school. I was hospitalized for 2 or 3 weeks to undergo surgery to remove a benign tumor. It all started on the first day of my hospital stay. I was exhausted after numerous tests. Lying in bed, I was told that lights minus out would be at 9 o'clock. For a young person like me, was 9 really an hour to fall asleep? But surprisingly, as soon as the lights went off, I drifted right off. I was in a double room, and my bed was near the corridor. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but suddenly, I woke up. The noise came from the bed by the window. At first, I thought, could this be a ghost? I was actually curious to see what a ghost would look like. Thinking about it now, that was pretty foolish. I listened carefully. The sound seemed to be TV noise, some kind of talk show or variety channel, but the conversation was unclear. It sounded like whispered chatter, but harsh and degrading. I covered my ears and turned over, trying to go back to sleep. But being a natural night owl, trying to sleep at 9 was a disaster. I woke up fully alert. Plus, the noise made it impossible to rest. I wondered if I should complain to the nurse or just pull the curtain and grumble. Though annoyed, I didn't want to cause trouble on my first day and end up labeled a problem patient, so I decided to endure it for one day. If it kept going, I'd complain later. Despite my resolve, the noise was unbearable. So, pretending to sigh dramatically to hint at my mood, I waited, hoping they'd get the message. Right then, laughter came from the other bed. I thought, they can still laugh? Instinctively, I wanted to grumble, but as I turned my head to stare toward the window minus side bed, I saw the TV light flickering through the gap in the curtain between our beds like a dividing line. There, behind the curtain, I saw a shadow, someone sitting on the neighboring bed. They stood up and slid the curtain from the bottom. I could see the person slipping on those slippers red, but almost blackened from wear. I thought he was heading for the bathroom, but instead of leaving after putting on the slippers, he started moving directly toward my side. He slid forward slowly, like he was dragging his feet without lifting them properly. He kept coming, silent and steady. Then he collided with the curtain. The curtain suddenly pressed tightly against him, molding every bump and groove perfectly matching the shape of a human body. I was frozen with fear. His strange behavior paralyzed me. I couldn't even scream. I just stared up at that curtain, silently begging him not to come any closer. No sooner had the thought formed in my mind than he stopped advancing. Then, without warning, he raised both hands straight up, slowly pulling the curtain upwards with them. As the curtain rose, I saw beneath it a row dotted with red circles, gradually coming into view from below. As the curtain lifted higher, the blood-red apron over the robe became visible. Those slippers so red they were almost black, the dotted robe. The red APR on each one looked drenched in blood. It was utterly revolting. Slowly, he kept raising his hands, then started moving toward me again. My heart nearly burst from terror. I let out a scream, then everything went black. The next morning, I woke up in a completely unfamiliar single room. As soon as I opened my eyes, I pressed the call button. When the nurse arrived, I poured out everything crying, telling her all about what happened the night before. After hearing me out, the nurse immediately arranged for me to be moved to another room. From that day on, I was relocated from my old double room to a noisy 6-person ward. During the nights, I took sleeping pills to rest. The noisy ants chatting during the day strangely gave me some comfort. Thanks to that, I was able to focus on treatment without panic. To this day, I still don't know what really happened in the bed beside me that night. But thinking back, the nurse who listened to me carefully didn't comfort me. She looked serious as she helped me change rooms right away. Maybe she knew some secrets. One more thing, I confirmed later that the bed beside me was indeed occupied, but the person sleeping there wore ordinary pajamas, top and pants, not the 1-piece robe, and no bloody apron. I have to believe the old lady who slept there was someone extraordinary, because who would dare sleep in that spot? Also, anyone who's been hospitalized knows the curtains in wards aren't that thin. The glow from the TV wouldn't shine through curtains like that. So what exactly was the shadow I saw then? This is a story from a hospital I once encountered. The location is where I live, in Xiangshuang County, northeastern part of the Shikoku region, Tibet area. The Tibet here means the area west of the Linchuan watershed. The most famous sightseeing spot in Tibet is Marujiui City. They say the local specialty is udon noodles. A must try if you ever come through. Back to the story. One day, my father, uncle, and I went to visit a hospitalized neighbor. A few years ago, that hospital underwent renovations. The interior now features full walls of glass, making the space feel open and bright. It was just past noon. We chatted as we hunted for the elevator to the wards. When we got to the elevator, I noticed a woman dressed in red climbing inside. We rushed over, and just as the doors began to close, I hurriedly pressed the button to go up. My father and uncle caught up as the doors were snapping shut. But then the closing door slowly creaked open again. I said sorry and peeked inside, but no one was there. The three of us exchanged looks, confused. Nobody spoke inside the elevator. A heavy silence hung for what felt like minutes, until finally we reached the 5th floor. As we stepped out, I asked my uncle, "Did you see a woman and read down on the 1st floor just now?" They both nodded but said nothing. It was terrifying. All of us saw the woman, yet she vanished into thin air. No matter how we thought about it, it made no sense. Later, when chatting with our neighbor, I mentioned what happened. A nurse nearby overheard and smiled, saying, "Don't worry, maybe you all just saw things." It was obvious she was just trying to reassure us. Since then, I've dreaded taking the elevator. That woman's red figure haunted my thoughts. I shudder at the thought of what her face might have looked like. So every time I ride the elevator, I can't help wondering what would happen if I accidentally met her inside. People like that, are they even human? Belonging to this world? This was something I experienced on my 18th birthday. On that day, a friend called me a front B, invited me out. They had prepared a surprise for my birthday. After hearing the time and place they arranged, I felt a little scared. a bit uneasy but also curious and excited. The meeting time was 8 p.m. The location? An infamous, abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. Why choose such a place at night? It made no sense, but I couldn't let my friend's effort go to waste. So, I went alone to that deserted hospital. When I arrived, I didn't see anyone outside, so I stepped straight inside through the hospital's entrance. Once inside, the door suddenly shut behind me. It was an automatic door in an era when automatic doors were rare, especially in abandoned places. It shouldn't have closed by itself. I thought, you guys really planned a terrifying surprise. Now that the door was closed, even if I wanted to run away, I couldn't. There was no getting out. I had no choice but to keep going deeper inside. I walked, trying to convince myself my friends were waiting for me somewhere inside, lonely in the hospital's corridors. Odd sounds echoed occasionally, everywhere I looked. Some passages were blocked off or inaccessible. At the end of a slanting hallway, I chose to turn right. And then right there I encountered the scariest and most dangerous thing I've ever faced. Shining my flashlight deep into that hallway, I saw two figures standing in the middle. One was wearing a doctor's coat, the other, a nurse's uniform. Both faced away from me. Their clothes were filthy, grimy. Worst of all, the doctor held a kitchen cleaver. The nurse gripped a syringe. At first, I thought this must be my friends in costume, trying to scare me. I even chuckled to myself, curious to see which one of them dressed as a nurse. It would be hilarious. Slowly, I moved closer, laughing and calling out, "Is that you? Trying to scare me dressed like that?" Suddenly, they spun around. They lunged at me, weapons swinging, the cleaver and syringe flashing in the dim light. Even if they were just friends playing a prank, that moment genuinely terrified me. I looked closely at their faces. They were no friends. Their faces were those of an older man and woman, like an uncle and aunt. They attacked, swinging the cleaver and syringe wildly. The situation got dangerous fast. I cowed and dodged in time. The cleaver slashed across my left hand, leaving a shallow cut. Panic surged. I spun and ran as fast as I could. I yelled as I fled down the opposite corridor, the two still chasing me. I have no idea how long I ran. I dared not look back, just kept running with all my might. Finally, I burst into a bright area. There, I saw my friends waiting. They were holding a cake and singing happy birthday. Seeing them, I calmed down. That must have been their plan to lead me that way with a scare. After I came in, they locked the door behind me. I asked, breathless, "Who were those two? You scared me half to death." I showed them the cut on my left hand, protesting how dangerous it was. Real knives, real harm. They all looked confused. No one planned a surprise like that. They insisted, because I didn't believe them. They pulled out a phone. They showed me a video. The footage was from inside the building. It was a live stream. They rewound to earlier scenes. I was seen, spooked and clueless, then running for my life. But in the entire video only I appeared. Still, eventually, they believed me, because on one part of the corridor there was a mirror. The camera caught the reflection as I ran by, and reflected behind me those two figures, the uncle in the doctor's coat and the aunt in the nurse's uniform. They chased me, brandishing cleaver and syringe. After seeing the video, all of us immediately fled the abandoned hospital, and none of us dared come near it again. That birthday surprise became something unforgettable for life. This is a story my father told me. It was just after the war. That hospital cared for many wounded soldiers. Back then, due to the war, blood supplies were always scarce. Lots of people struggled to get transfusions. My father was living in a hospital somewhere in Hokkaido. The ward was a room holding 8 patients. My father said he slept at the very back, by the window. Nearest to the door was a man named Junjiro. One night, everyone was exhausted and fast asleep. But my father couldn't fall asleep for some reason. He was wide awake, probably because of the pain. Tossing and turning, he suddenly noticed Junjiro quietly getting up and slipping out of the ward. A long time passed before Junjiro snuck back in. The same thing happened again the second and third nights. At midnight, Junjiro would slide out of bed and leave the ward, and he always tried not to be seen. My father wondered where the man was going every night in the dead of night. He was deeply curious about Junyiro's behavior, so he decided if Junyiro got up again at midnight, he would follow and find out. That night came. As usual, Junyiro slipped out of bed and scouted around cautiously before quietly leaving the ward. My father squinted and watched him carefully, then climbed out himself, trailing behind. The hospital hallways were silent except for the sound of slippers dragging on the floor. The sound gave my father the creeps. Barefoot, he tiptoed along, thinking, where is that guy going? Junyiro, seemingly having a destination, walked steadily on. They arrived at the basement. My father saw Junyiro enter a room where blood supplies were stored. From a distance, my father wondered what he was doing inside. He crept to the doorway, peered in, but the light inside was dim, so it was hard to see clearly. So my father slipped inside quietly and hid in a corner, inching closer to watch. Then he saw something horrifying.